What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, joined by a very special guest in Chris Dunlap, one of the co-hosts of the Future Is Now Sports podcast. And if I'm right, Chris, I believe a guy with some football in your background. You played back in the day, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Played through high school and then started coaching in college. Spent 5 years at Old Dominion University.
Old Dominion, there you go. Well, I used to play back in my Pop Warner days. Certainly don't have near the experience that you do on the field. And the reason I wanted to talk to you today is because I find in these volatile Twitter streets that we reside in that you usually have a pretty even keeled take and a really good kind of handle, I think, on some of the struggles the defense has certainly shown through these first 5 games. But I love how you usually put things in perspective in regards to the scheme, some of the players maybe doing actually what they're asked to do, and other mechanisms within the kind of scheme itself taking away from, I guess, players that are kind of punching bags for the general public. Obviously, number one on that list is Quay Walker, somebody that I think you and I have gone back and forth with a few people online about how it is fascinating to me how people in the moment, obviously live watching the games, can see Quay in position to make a tackle or in position to at least make a play. And yep, absolutely, sometimes he gets taken advantage of, or is not quite as explosive enough, or doesn't quite have the juice to get the tackle or get the guy on the ground. But I loved how you put it the other day regarding, look, they're all not all going to be superstars, and to your mind, it seems that Quay is good enough to work in this defense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was actually after I had made that point about Quay just being someone who's going to kind of do his job and allow things to be easier for other people. I went back and I looked at what I believe it was Lance Erline or whoever kind of does the scouting over at NFL.com and what they
That's
said about him.
Lance, yeah.
Yep, and one of the things that stuck out was, and it was a lot similar to what he's been in his 3 years. He plays disciplined, team-oriented football, but he's unlikely to become a top-level playmaker as a pro. He's got little tight hips, um, struggles to get off blocks at times, and things like that. But even in that quote, I feel like those are things that he's been doing. He does a lot of taking on blocks, and that's what you're going to want for him to do because you've got Edgerrin Cooper who's going to be that we hope
Right.
flashy playmaker and let him be the guy that clean things up for him and let him run and hit and those types of things. Let Quay just kind of take up blocks in a sense.
It's one thing I wanted to talk about was the construction of the linebacker group, because you mentioned Edgerrin Cooper, who we've all seen kind of get more and more kind of put on his plate, or at least more playing time, right? And it's fascinating to juxtapose where the linebacker group is with where the safety group is, because you hear a lot kind of the amazement of they really overhauled this safety group in one offseason, right? I mean, between the signing of Xavier McKinney, the drafting of 3 safeties, 2 of which who have already made a pretty significant impact early in the year. My contention is you can't completely overhaul every position in one offseason. And I think what we're seeing, and I'd love to get your take, what we're seeing is like, yes, they took care of safety. They've got to work with what they've got on hand at linebacker, but they did add Edgerrin Cooper, and Hopper is there as well, though he hasn't really played much to this point. But I think, they're trying to fit some maybe pieces that don't really work or go where they should as far as what Hafley's trying to do on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I really think I like kind of what their thought process is in linebacker. They want to use that early pick on edge to be their superstar in a sense. They're kind of field tilter at the position. They've got um, Quay and they've got Hopper. So they've got some young options, some cheaper kind of options. When I was thinking about the offseason coming up, maybe that's something that because it's not very expensive to
Mm,
get
right.
another linebacker that's like the Drew Tranquil, those types, Alshire, Cashman over the Minnesota guys. So it's not very expensive to kind of get an upgrade over. I mean, maybe Quay, an upgrade over Isaiah McDuffie. So. those are things that I believe really strongly believe as far as with our linebacker play.
Do you think the front four has underachieved, or is this what you expected? Because I know going through the summer, right, going through training camp, I mean, I was there every day, and it did appear that they were getting a lot of not just pressure, but causing a lot of havoc, which is what we had heard they wanted from the front four as far as
Hmm.
shooting gaps, getting in the backfield. But it certainly hasn't looked like that has been the case since the regular season began. And I know some of it is, oh, we're trying to contain mobile quarterbacks, and some of it is rush lane integrity. But has it surprised you how unproductive the front has been?
On an individual basis, in the pass game, yes. On the run game, when you look at kind of stuff percentage and that's where I originally thought that we're going to see more havoc kind of calls, and they're
Right.
really still top 10 in kind of run stuff's fine, and we've made a huge jump in EPA and those types of things, despite playing with lighter boxes more. Like we
Yeah.
play with lighter boxes at 50% this year as opposed to 40% last year, and we've made a huge jump in EPA on the ground, and even just in yards per attempt. So in the run game, I think it's done what it's supposed to. In the pass game, we're still really pretty similar to last year as well. It just looks different. Like we're still creating pressures in the top 10. We're still sacks in the top 10. It's just Rashawn Gary isn't winning as much, and maybe I think that's something as far as like a structure type of thing where if you think about, I don't know how much basketball you watch, but there's a difference between playing like one on one where there's like no rules. You could dribble all up and down the court. If you try to
Right.
post up, it's fine, or you could that doesn't work. You can dribble back out, or playing something that's more structured like three dribbles and you have to shoot, or one dribble, or that type of stuff. So I feel like right now in the system, we're not giving up a lot of scrambles, which we did give up a lot
Yeah.
last year. The Giants game sticks out, and some other big situations where quarterbacks were able to escape. So we're not giving that up, and I think this is just some of the kind of give and take with it. And so I think Rashawn Gary and Preston, those exterior guys, it's just taking them a little bit of time to figure out to play this new game and figure out how to get their one on ones won like within structure, as opposed to I think in Barry's system it seemed like guys could just rush freely, and they just if they gave up a scramble they gave one up.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Gary because that's another punching bag online, right? On Twitter, every game you see people wringing their hands about it, which I understand because of the contract he was handed and because he has been productive in the past, right? And to see him now go through this stretch where he's not getting to the quarterback, I know one was taken off because of penalty, and there are all sorts of mitigating circumstances about being chipped and things like that. But do you see the same guy? Because to me, I don't really notice much of a difference other than, yes, sometimes he's being asked to rush with his hands in the ground, something he didn't do a whole lot of under Barry. But outside of that, he looks like the same guy. I see plenty of clips when I go back and watch his pass rushing in particular. I see plenty of reps where, he's close. It's not like he's stonewalled every single time, but it does feel like every third down when you want to get to the QB, affect the quarterback at least. That's where he seems to really be coming up short. And that to me is a bit mystifying.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that piece out myself. You look at I can't remember exactly who it was that clipped up some of his pass rushes that he got one on one, and he won a lot of those. It
A
felt
lot
like
of
those
them.
reps.
Right.
So I mean, I thought at sometimes or at the beginning of the year he was a little bit slower off the ball than he had been in years past, not using as much kind of speed rushes and that those types of rushes at that point. And I think that the chip piece, maybe that's even when you're not getting chipped, if you're thinking you could get chipped, then that kind of affects like what your pass rush plan is going to be. And then the fact that we played like those two scrambling quarterbacks, and I mean Darnold's not a bad athlete. I mean he's below like the Lamar Jacksons and that type of thing, but
Right.
he's still pretty athletic enough where he can hurt you and get a 12-yard chunk on 3rd and 8, which I think he did against San Francisco
Yep.
early in that game. So just pretty much trying to make sure quarterbacks aren't getting out, and they've done a good job on that. I think he'll start to heat up, and I feel like he's heated up in the past. there's been games, I think it was the Lions game last year, he had like two and a
Yep.
half, three
Yep.
sacks. And
Caused
so, I
the
mean,
fumble, etc. Yeah.
so if he's got, you know, 6, 8 sacks in a year, and he has games where he's got two or games where he's got three, and it's kind of like the sack numbers. If he comes out and gets 2.5 sacks this week, he's just going to be slightly below kind of the pace where he's been in the past. So it's
Yeah.
just we we're not as good in time to pass. I think we're like 31st. So teams are getting a lot of time to pass, but that's still pretty much in line of where it's been in the past, and we're still generating pressures.
Yeah, the pressures are there. And of course, like I said earlier, like he's viewed through the prism of his contract, right? And so
Of
when you
course.
talk about him getting 10 or fewer sacks on the year, people get all upset because he's supposed to be a premium pass rusher, ending the year with 8 sacks and having a career where he's never had double digit sacks. I get why fans will get frustrated or point to him in particular, but it's not just him. That's the other thing. It's not like we've seen Preston Smith come alive in this scheme. Lucas Van Ness looks a little lost, especially on some of these third downs. I just think it's a real kind of, this is part of being under construction and flipping from, a very different type of defensive scheme in front and being asked to do very different things, not just rushing with your hand in the ground, but everything. Like you're talking about the rules on each and every snap and what you're being asked to do, whether it's a game, a stunt, what have you. I think, yeah, it's taken a while and probably a little longer than maybe we thought it would for these guys to understand everything as far as not just their plan to beat the guy across from them, but how it works within the scheme. I mean, I think that's what we've seen on display here through 5 weeks.
Yeah, and he's went against three good tackles on that side as well. I believe Braden Smith for the Colts is over there.
All right.
Brian O'Neill for Minnesota. You got Lane Johnson week one. We kind of everybody teed off against the Titans, and it was a little bit maybe disappointing against the Rams. But like I said, we looked at his one-on-one pass reps, and he was really good in those, and he won a lot of those. So it's just time, like Hafley says a lot, just time coverage to rush. Maybe sometimes he wins on them, but the quarterback's able to get the ball out just because we have a softer kind of zone in there as opposed to playing kind of tighter coverage.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was looking at match quarters earlier this week and kind of through 5 weeks, the Packers are roughly in the middle of the pack as far as using any kind of disruption at the line of scrimmage with their defensive backs. Not just press man, as it were, but simply like trying to reroute receivers, trying to be
Hmm.
up in their grill, if you will. And then you marry that, you talk about marrying coverage with your rush. As far as sending numbers, Halfley is a lot lower than I expected coming into the year. Not like the eye test through the season certainly backs this up, but they're not sending. I mean, they certainly don't send more than 5, and they barely send 5 on the regular. Now, it doesn't mean they haven't at all, but I expected a little bit more variance there. Have you been surprised at all by the approach, and I would say somewhat conservative approach from Halfley so far?
Uh, I didn't know exactly what it was going to be. I know people talked about, well, he blitzed a ton at Boston College, and I thought it was going to be a little bit different there, just from a talent perspective. And the college and the NFL game is a lot different. I think it just depends. Like something like situationally, I still think he's fairly aggressive. It's just sometimes it may be, if they're getting into 22 personnel or something like that, or you're not getting a ton of third and longs or that type of thing, then
Right.
um, it'll throw things off. But like one thing I do know, you look at that drive and it didn't work out. The Minnesota drive when we got back in it and they end up driving to get a field goal. First, the play before that drive where Keyshawn Nixon got the strip sack was a blitz. The next
Mhm.
play, that next first play of that next drive was a blitz. The next play after that was a blitz. And when we have a big gotta have it down, it's going to be a blitz. If you think about the Anthony Richardson scramble at the end of that one before they threw that touchdown, he sent it. So like I feel like every defensive coordinator has DNA, and you can see his DNA is still to be extremely aggressive and get
Yeah.
after with 5. It's just sometimes you want to throw off a tendency. You don't want to have Like I can't blitz every, third and medium or that type of thing. So he is kind of lower than I would have thought. I would have thought we'd have been towards the middle of the league, and we're
Again, I agree.
28th,
Yeah.
29th.
Yep.
But yeah, I, it's a little bit surprising, but I think it'll just depend on, kind of situation. It'll be more situation based. And we had Jair out
Right. Well, and
as
that was
well.
kind of what I was going to bring up as far as that Minnesota game is a perfect example where he's kind of he has to protect his secondary a little bit, right? Because
Hmm.
Jair's not there. You've already had Ballantyne beat bad. Stokes is having a rough game. And they did get home and create the strip sack fumble, but they also allowed Jefferson wide open over the middle because they left him one-on-one with one of our backup corner, a corner that isn't Jair. And
Hmm.
they get paid too. They block up the blitz, and there's Jefferson for a big gain to help kind of salt that game away. But that brings me to cornerback because I'm watching these games and I'm thinking clearly now without Jair for the last couple of weeks, Valentine seems to be, I'm not going to say the answer there. I know they'll probably continue to rotate him and Stokes, but what to your eyes has been transpiring as far as long term, who do you think they want to play opposite Jair? Because right now, I want to give Stokes some grace. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it does seem like when teams need it and teams got to have it, they're going after Stokes, which I understand. And you're going to get beat. It's life in the
Hmm.
league, right? But to my eyes, it seems like Valentine is probably the long term answer there, at least for this season.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've gotten from it. The fact that they even split them. The interesting piece for me is actually, how much do they like Nixon? Hafley will bring him up unannounced. I thought it was shocked me that the last week that they decided to leave him out there on the outside and play
Right.
him the entire game and then rotate Valentine, which I was like, maybe it's because Valentine first week back and they don't want him to play all the reps, but it's going to be interesting, especially when Jair comes back. Are they going to move Nixon out to the outside, or is it because he spoke yesterday about you know the versatility, which I love, that they
Yeah.
feel like they can play big nickel or they can if it's 11 personnel better team, they can get in there and play with Nixon and run nickel with only two of the safeties on the field. So I think out of Stokes and Valentine, it's definitely going to be Valentine. It makes more sense, from a cap standpoint, just because Valentine has two more cheap years and Stokes you have to resign.
Right.
But like I said, I'm interested to see if they believe that the guy is Nixon or they believe that they're going to have to go and get somebody, in this draft pretty high because they had mentioned that they were thinking about doing that in the
Yeah.
previous draft.
Well, and it's fascinating too to watch it play out opponent by opponent, right? Like I think
Hmm.
that there's been a lot of talk about Bullard down in the box as part of that kind of big nickel against the Rams, but that's a team that's missing their top two wide receivers. They know they want them to run the ball, or they're
Hmm.
thinking they're probably going to try and run the ball a lot. And that's one of the reasons that, catapulted Hafley to that setup. I don't know against the Cardinals, man. Like they've got some legit weapons. Clearly, Marvin Harrison Jr. is a headliner, but McBride has had a really strong year at tight end. Obviously, you're worried about Murray and his legs. I think this is a game where we're going to see a lot of rotation because
Hmm.
obviously you saw Evan Williams come on and play very well in his first extended action. But I wouldn't be surprised if he sees limited action and they have Bullard back at safety this week. That's where you talk about the versatility is great, except it might keep some talented guys on the sideline.
Yeah, yeah. And he, like I said, he mentioned part of it as well in that last press conference, being that every 11 personnel is a different. If you think about when Lazard was
Right.
in Green Bay, how big he is as a receiver, how good he is as a blocker. In Atlanta last year when they had Mac Hollins, like that's like a 11 kind of heavy personnel where maybe I want to play big nickel to that. Maybe I want to play nickel if it's more of kind of what the Cardinals have with Greg Dortch and those types of guys. So, and then you have to even get into a down and distance split, which he kind of mentioned as well. I could have the same personnel on the field, and on first and 10, they're going to get more into a condensed or tight kind of formation, and so maybe I want to have big nickel to that same 11 full receiver group as opposed
Right.
to on second down and medium or something like that, then they have that same group in, I might want to go to my true nickel.
Right.
So
And then you get into guys running on and off the field after every down, and that gets me the heebie-jeebies because, eventually there's going to be a mix-up. They're going to have to call a timeout. I'm going to get mad because they're wasting timeouts. That's just how that ends up. I know that. Chris, I cannot thank you enough for the time, man. Make sure you people check out the Future Is Now Sports podcast. Chris, thank you so much for your time, man.
I really appreciate you having me on. It's always good to talk Packers.